Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee and guests. I just want to offer a brief introduction because I haven't had the privilege of being able to testify before our Senate members. So my name is Melanie Wright. I am a 28-year veteran teacher, and I also have received my bachelor's in music education from Ball State University. I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from Anderson University. Loved it so much that I stayed on an additional 3 years to get my administrative license, and then decided to pursue politics instead of being an administrator, which leads me here. So I've got to tell you, it's with a heavy heart that I offer this testimony, because this is the reason that I got into the race in the first place, to be a representative and to be a voice for public education. As someone who has only been a career woman my whole life, everything rides on this and the importance of this. And it goes back to where I had such great role models in education who were such profound influences in my life. And I wanted to be able to give that back to other people. So what we have is the first piece of national legislation that came down with the No Child Left Behind Act, that when I was working on my master's degree, we studied quite readily to see the effects of that. And then we had different states throughout the country that came in with education reform, and with a mixture of that, we now sit at this pivotal point where it's greatly affecting our schools. So I do realize that there's a national component to all this. I don't want to be blind to that fact. But I will tell you that what I can offer you today is my expertise as how this is affecting my school system and my students and my colleagues, my building principals, and my superintendent, who's wonderful. So for that, I can offer you some action research that what's happening in my school might be able to be similar to schools with similar demographics. I do teach in a very small school system. We have an enrollment of 913 students. We have 2 schools. We have a K-6 school, and we have a 7 through 12 school. I've been there for the last 15 years, but although I've taught for 28 years, I've had the advantage of teaching in Fort Wayne at a large school. Then I went to North Carolina for 5 years, to South Carolina for 5 years, and then back to Indiana to work on my graduate work. So very diverse experience in 5 different school corporations. I've got to tell you that in 2011, that was really a watershed moment in education, because things changed very rapidly in regard to tying student test scores to teacher evaluations, and to also take the collective bargaining out of the districts. And that was truly a watershed moment. As a veteran teacher and a very responsible contract negotiator, I've got to say, we just encouraged our fellow colleagues to stay the course and to stay on the old contract, because the change was so fast. To me, it was some of the frustration that I hear people talk about the Affordable Health Care Act, some of the big systemic change that happens, and all of a sudden people, they can't figure out what's going on. It had the same role and effect for education. So we encouraged our members to just stick with it and just to wait it out. And so our contract expired this past June 30th. So the day that I left session and went back to teaching, I immediately started working on the teacher evaluation piece and also on the negotiations committee. Again, faithfully working with my superintendent, not being antagonistic at all. Through the course of this, there were some things that happened that really stuck in my mind. The first was a colleague and I, a veteran teacher, had a conversation with 2 young teachers who were second-grade teachers. And this was in the spring of 2012. They had to make a decision that by July 1st of 2012, they would have to enroll in a master's degree program and have it completed by September of 2014 to ever roll over to the master's program on the salary schedule. So one teacher was planning on taking a vacation, which she canceled, and put it towards her graduate work. And the other young teacher looked at us, and she said, I don't want you guys to think I'm a bad teacher, but I really just want to have children first before I pursue my graduate work. Of course, we said, no, you have to do what's best for your family. And so she chose to go that route. But that was it's very hard for those ladies, and they were only like 24. You know, in my course of talking to different people, I haven't had not one educator who said that they didn't want accountability or they didn't want to make things better. that they didn't want to change. They didn't want to be responsible for what they offered to students. Not one. But I've knocked on the doors of people who wanted to be in education for a long time. One lady in particular on the very northeast part of my district called me back and said, "Where do you stand on education?" She had tears in her eyes. And she said, "I didn't want to retire." She was an administrator. "I didn't want to retire. I just felt like I had to because the changes are happening so fast." I had other conversations like that too. Another colleague of mine, Jane Unger, retired 3 years ago. She was an incredible first grade teacher. She said to me, this time of the year, on her first year of retirement, "I really hope they have time to teach about the Pilgrims and the Native Americans." And I say that with a heavy heart because it's very focused on testing. If you've not been in a classroom since 2011, I ask you to go look in a classroom just for 3 days. Pick 3 classrooms in your district and just sit and watch. The changes we've had since then: 90-minute reading blocks for students, for kindergartners, K through 6. I am a music teacher. I have them for 45 minutes once a week. So at the beginning of the school year, I have to go in and make sure they have at least 6 different activities to keep them moving. Pacing is vital when it comes to kindergarten. If they don't move fast enough, they'll wet their pants, trust me. But that is so developmentally inappropriate. And they can't even travel from where I'm standing to where I was sitting to go to their Waterford reading program to get individualized reading instruction because they can't count the transition. It's just, I don't understand it. Last year, the first graders were always late to their specials because they had to do their 90-minute reading block. So they were always 5 minutes late. So basically, we've put them on a modified junior high schedule. From first grade through sixth grade, they rotate for reading, they rotate for math by ability grouping, and they have to try to squeeze in recess and lunch and specials. They have homeroom teachers now instead of the regular classroom teachers. We have instructional assistants that help us out. They can only get 28 hours a week because if they have any more, then the health care comes into play, which is another financial burden on our strapped school systems. So we have a rotating 5th person who comes in as the instructional assistant, especially to those kindergarten classes who desperately need it. We have to differentiate almost for the entire class. So it's not unusual to find, like my colleague Christine Terpstra back there, to have to modify lessons for 30 different students to make sure that they're adequately having their needs met. Young people, including Christine and other colleagues, have told me they didn't realize it was going to be a 24/7 job with lesson planning, grading, parental contacts, no time for collaboration, no time for professional development. That's all gone. Special ed, you know, as a fine arts teacher, I love my special ed kids because they excel in my subject. They move, they dance, they sing, I love it. Taps into a different part of their brain. A special ed teacher has piles and piles of paperwork to fill out before they can ever start seeing them on a regular schedule. And then again with the case conferences in the spring, more case conferences, more meetings, websites that don't work, information that disappears once it's typed in, and then you sit down with the parents and look so unprofessional. We now have I-STEP pep rallies. We have teacher talks, where if we're really linked with a certain kid, we have to sit down and really give them a teacher talk test. You can do this, you can do it, I believe in you. We have teacher sponsors. We give them gifts and candy leading them up to the I-STEP test. Another challenge for administrators, how do you set a budget within this? Because the students move, and you can pretty much lock in who's going to come to your school, but you really don't know until the date that they show up on the first day of school. So we've lost some students, we'll gain some students. It's just so difficult to budget. The curriculum is so narrow. I had a group of students tell me that they knew exactly what the ratio or what the percentage was for choosing A, B, C, or D. I want them to look for the second right answer. I want to know when I'm in a nursing home, somebody's looking for solutions that's outside the box. So as I left session, I began the teacher evaluation committee and negotiations. That was sobering. I feel like I have a unique perspective because I implemented that very legislation of which I'm a part of. So for example, we tried to modify our teacher evaluation so that it worked for our administrator who have so many tasks themselves. They have so many needs they have to meet that weren't even evident 10 years ago. So we pared it down so that our veteran teachers would have one evaluation, and then our beginning teachers would have 2 evaluations with some walkthroughs. And the thing is, teachers that were hired after July 1st of 2012 are considered probationary teachers for 3 years. So I had a colleague, 2 colleagues of mine, some of the best and brightest men in the profession, one at the elementary, one at the high school. They'll be probationary teachers. You know, the first grade teacher said, how do I say that when the other 2 are established and I'm probationary? People are going to think I did something wrong. We couldn't change the verbiage. Then at negotiations, we went into it, again, working with our superintendent and school board members. And we knew that if we could hold off, we could get the younger teachers further up the salary scale, because we only get about $900 an increment, which would cover just about the raise in any just the raise in general living expenses, and then we always have an insurance increase that comes in January. But instead, we knew that we were going to freeze them. So we voted knowing that they were going to freeze because we couldn't do anything about it. So we ended up all negotiating a raise together in good faith, looking at the budget, looking at what money, looking how it projected outward. And we still had to freeze everybody's pay. So that means we can negotiate for performance pay, and that's going to go as a stipend, not to living and cost of living increases, not to additional insurance increases. So much had to be omitted from that contract. It was just sobering. So now a lot of the informal discussions have to happen between the superintendent and between teachers, covering little things that were just always just in contract. Even putting it in school board policy, you know, requires that discussion. We did get a new salary schedule. So for beginning year teacher, I just want to throw some real numbers out here. Beginning year teacher at our school corporation with 0 years of experience receives $31,528.35. When they get to be a 5th year teacher, $35,118.30. When you get to the top of the scale, $54,359, that's with a master's. I don't know how you raise a family. Like if you're a main breadwinner, I don't know how you raise a family on that when the cost of living gets higher and performance award comes in stipends most of the time. You just don't know. You won't know until you see what the budget is. I asked another colleague whose house payment is less than her student loan payment, spends hours at school. The work doesn't equal the pay for the young teachers especially. I see them at school burned out. I was supposed to have another colleague who came with me today. She's a special ed teacher. She couldn't take the rest of the time off. She had too much to do. She's like, I'm so sorry. I said, I get it. What I'm afraid is that we're going to have a start a career instead of a long-term career. And I just feel like we could use a little bit of action research to see what we could apply to other communities to at least just soften the effect and have some help. So as a person who doesn't just like to complain and drop a problem at somebody's feet, I have given this some thought. We do have Indiana Department of Education outreach coordinators. We have 8 of them. I think that's expanded to 11. That would be an easy opportunity for those regional areas to feed concerns into those regional coordinators. They in turn could turn that over to Superintendent Ritz. Superintendent Ritz could make it, she could package that up and present it to the Senate Ed Committee and the House Ed Committee. And we could maybe look at just doing some legislation from the bottom up, or maybe even taking some legislation away that is hindering, or loosening it up and doing what's best for kids. It's almost like, I'm going to use this medical analogy. where we don't know what the symptoms are, so we just keep throwing medicine at it, and pretty soon we don't know the interaction of all those medications and what it's done. And I think we need to start pulling some of that off and seeing what we have. We may have a teacher shortage, but we don't have a shortage of educational expertise in our districts. Let's just utilize those resources. Thank you.
All right, any questions? Okay, thank you.